So good morning, everybody. On behalf of Region 5, I want to welcome everybody. My name is Gabrielle Pasquale. I'm the Clinical Training Manager here at Western Tidewater CSB. And I'm going to have a co-host today. I'm very excited. My colleague, Lucretia Jackson, is going to be co-hosting with me. So we're going to have two people managing the chat. I'm very excited today. We are in the process of securing CEUs, and those should be coming to me by the end of the week. However, I need all of you guys to type your name and what CSB you're with in the chat so we can actually count you towards getting the CEUs. We'll be sending out the PowerPoint with the recording at a later date, so please don't feel like you need to rush and type things out and write them down. With that being said, we have over half the folks here already. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to pass it off to Lucretia. She's going to do a brief introduction and we'll get started.
Hey, good morning, all. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about our presenters and the presentation today. We have Mr. Hameen Shabazz. He is known as the father of non-faith-based reentry in South Carolina. As a formerly incarcerated person, he struggled to secure employment and housing. He eventually enrolled and matriculated at Midlands Technical College. Mr. Shabazz is the author of A Life Changed by Education. Powerful. He's an activational speaker, a professor at his alma mater, Midland Technical College. He's also the founder of Project NAS, Not a Statistic. What a powerful name. Project NAS serves at-risk youth as well as families of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated persons. Please welcome Hameen Shabazz. He has an MS in Organizational Management and Leadership and is a candidate for the Global Learner Development Facilitator. Let's again welcome Mr. Hameen Shabazz.
Greetings and salutations. How's everybody doing? Again, my name is Hameen Shabazz, and I will be speaking with you guys today about the power of I am. I think it's only fitting that I tell you a little more about myself so that we can get a little more acquainted, feel a little more comfortable. The first thing is that as I was sharing with the host, I never quite got accustomed to this online virtual training type thing. I'm more of a face-to-face type guy. However, we will do our best to make it through, right? We'll do our best to make it through. And so again, my name is Hameen Shabazz, and yes, I have a Master of Science in Management and Organizational Leadership. I finished a career of the Global Career Development Facilitators course. I filed for my credentialing, so pretty soon I'll be able to take that candidate off the end of my name, and I will also be able to train individuals in career development, and that will go further with the students that I serve at Midlands Technical College and my nonprofit organization. So again, I work for Midlands Technical College. I serve the college. I don't work there. I serve the college. I tell my students, I work at the college. I work with faculty and staff, but I work for them. The same as I do with my nonprofit organization, Project NAS Community Development Corporation. I believe that we should be student-centered and we should be member-centered or customer-centered. I don't call my young people nor my adults to come through my nonprofit clients, as that is so unempowering. So once again, I finished my coursework in a doctorate program at Aspen University with higher education. I decided not to write my dissertation. The reason why is because I suffered a cerebrovascular accident a few years back, and also known as a stroke, and I received this epiphany during that time of my rehabilitation that my books is my dissertation. So I decided that I wasn't gonna write a formal dissertation. My first book, as Ms. Lucretia said, was A Life Changed by Education. That book is not published to the public because the college that I serve actually bought the book from me. I have no rights to it. That was a huge mistake on my part because because over the past 4 years, I'm sure the college has made a lot of money. But being an individual that comes from where I came from in life, where there wasn't a lot of money, when they came to me with a lump sum, I just took it and ran with it. So my second book I did publish, which is called From Prison Walls to College Halls, Achieving Success in the Face of Adversity, the power of I am, and that's the theme of this presentation today, the power of I am. What is the power of I am? I am strong, I am resilient, I am worthy of life, and I am life. What is the power of I am? Basically self-discovery, discover who you are, discover who one is, and we'll discuss today various tactics to engage our youth so that we can help empower them to engage in the journey of self-discovery. Because if we don't discover who we are, our talents, our gifts, our strengths, and our weaknesses, then it will become rather difficult for us to proceed and not fail at life. And I don't know what organizations you guys are from, but again, I have a reentry program that serve youths coming out of the Department of Juvenile Justice and serve adults coming out of adult prisons and the families of those people who are still incarcerated, because reality is that if the families are taking part in this child, they're serving a bid too, bid, i.e. sentence. And that's another thing. I may not use all the correct terminologies. I may use a lot of street terms or a lot of what is called ebonics, but that's just who I am because though I've earned higher education and I'm employed in a professional position, I believe that I have to keep my ear and my mind to the streets to be able to properly serve my population. That makes sense to everybody? All right, so we'll go ahead and jump right into what we're doing here. So, okay, that wasn't the button to hit to jump right into what we're doing here. Okay, here we are. Okay, so again, my nonprofit organization is called Project NAS, not a statistical community development corporation. Just to give you a little history of Project NAS. In 2011, I was unemployed. Life was horrible. I had been out of prison maybe 2 years, and I was working these dead end jobs, like a day labor, getting paid every day, and it was really disheartening for me because I knew I was a changed individual, but no one would give me an opportunity to earn a living wage, to earn gainful employment. Let me say it like that. So one day I went to this diner, and a friend of mine who I was incarcerated with for over 10 years. I spent 13 years and 7 months in prison, but I was incarcerated with this guy for about 10 of those years. And he actually owned this diner here in Columbia, South Carolina. And I remember thinking, wow, he was in prison like me. Now look at, he owned a diner. He owned this great diner. And we began to talk and we began to discuss issues as relates to coming home from prisons. And he said, hey, maybe we can meet here every Sunday and we could discuss these issues that we're having coming out of prison. I'll treat you to breakfast every morning. I mean, every Sunday morning that you come. So I began to come and we began to talk, and more guys began to come and more guys began to come and more guys began to come. And the more that we would discuss our issues coming home from prison, we had a number of things in common. One thing is we all began our stint of incarceration as juveniles. The next thing is that now that we're out of prison as adults, it was difficult for all of us to find jobs except for those who started their own businesses. So I began to learn that just sitting around talking to one another, and I don't know what just happened. Why did that go to slide 4 when I didn't touch anything? Um, Let me see here. Okay, so so okay, why did it jump to slide 3? Oh my goodness, man. Okay, so I decided that I would start Project Now's Community Development Corporation so that I could build networks to help people coming out of prisons. So that's how Project Now's began. June 9th, 2011. We just celebrated 10 years in business, and it's been a great 10 years. So my nonprofit organization, Project Nas, is a 501c3 organization. So what we know that is that it's our IRS sanctioned, and we can enjoy all of the benefits that comes from the IRS. We're having a 501c3, but we're also restricted to following the guidelines, policies, and procedures of the IRS as it relates to nonprofit organization. We offer reentry services, as I just told you, adults, youth, and their families. And again, we serve families. Okay, so that's just everything that we do. So the services that we offer a whole person development approach. And what that is that we actually take the youth and adults, but in terms of this presentation, we're dealing with youth. So we take the youth from the time of initial assessment. We of course we assess their needs and everything like that. And when we get into the planning stage, we plan as it relates to the biological, psychological, sociological, cultural, financial, and spiritual self, because those are the components that make up every human being. Me, you, and every youth that comes through your office. Those are the 6 aspects of the person. Um, and we also do reentry consultation, trainings, and workshops. Of course, we're doing a training and workshop right now with you guys. Um, but our reentry consultation is is when organizations around the country contact us, and we consult with them, as it relates to what can we offer that can benefit their population, so that their population can benefit their youth, if that make any kind of sense to you. We also do community outreach. We have our youth, and we go out and we wash cars, wash windows, excuse me, wash cars, wash windows. Um, we talk to the community. We try to get our people employed. So we talk to community businesses, and we make networks with various organizations in the area that can offer certain trainings. Um, we get our young people into college, and we pay for their application fees. And if they need further help with their books, Project Nas created a scholarship with Mills Technical College. It's called Meet the Mark Scholarship Fund for individuals who've been incarcerated, and now they are um, what is going on with this slideshow? I have no idea, I guarantee you. But but we pay for all these things, and we have a scholarship fund for young people and middle-aged people who actually have been incarcerated, so we can help with books and things like that. It's not really a lot of money, but it's enough money to help our people. And we offer career development guidance. Once again, I've completed the career development facilitators course. I'm still a candidate, so I can't refer to myself as facilitator. So we give guidance in career development, and we also refer our young people to to the Richland Library here in Columbia, South Carolina, so the career coaches can help to guide them through the process of getting a career. But one thing that we do in house is that we help them with resumes, we help them with cover letters, and we do mock interviews with them. So that's just our little contribution to their career development. And my wife and I, we've had the pleasure, like every 3 months, to go to the Richland Library, and we do a presentation called From Prison to Payroll. So module 1, get to know your youth. And the things we're going to talk about is what make youth services unique. The criminogenic life course. I'll probably spend more time on the criminogenic life course. Mental health versus bad behavior. Changing the model, because we know we're in the 21st century, we're in 2021, and the model has changed because people change, our youth has changed, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we know that mankind has evolved continuously throughout the past 2 million years, or whatever the case may be. So, all right, and transparency versus partial disclosure, full or partial disclosure, I'm sorry, and we'll discuss, when there's time to have transparency, if there's ever time to have transparency, and how much transparency that we will share with our young people to in an attempt to be relative to their situations. Building trust relationships. We're going to talk about communicating with impact and person-centered helping. All right. So this is something I want you to ask yourself, and please put it in chat. Thank you so much for the congratulations. This is a question that we just want to ask you, and please put it in the chat box. During your interview with your youths, what is the biggest obstacles or challenge that hinder the communication gap between you and your youth? And the slide just went by itself, and that's a good thing because I'm ready for it. So I just put a little statistics here just to set the tone of what we're going to talk about today. And I call it from the back of the bus to the front of confinement. That's what I call it. African American youth versus white youth. African American youth are 7 times more likely to be sentenced and incarcerated, and 13 times more likely to be charged with a violent crime. Those studies show that African American youth do not commit violent crimes at a larger rate than any other American group. Again, African Americans do not commit more violent crimes than any other group. So why is our country's youth being incarcerated, being charged 13 times more than any other than white youth? As relates to Latino youth is 4 times more likely to be incarcerated for drug offenses than white youths. Black and Latino youth are more likely to be sent to adult courts than any other population than white youths. And the question is, why is that? If these populations are no more likely to commit violent crimes, and here in South Carolina, the only way to to be transferred to adult courts is by way of extremely violent crimes, then why is our young people who are of hue more likely to be sent to adult courts? On any given day, you have 48,000 incarcerated youths in America. On any given day, and 44% of those incarcerated youths are Black and Latino youths. Now that sounds about equal, about fair, 44. So the other part is like 54, and then you have 2% other people who's incarcerated, youth who's incarcerated. However, when you look at the fact that African American youth and Latino youth only make up between 21 and 23% of the American population, then there's a problem there. There's a national crisis here. There's something going on. There's a real issue with that. Now, chapter 1 of my book is called Born to Fail. And in Born to Fail, I talk about socioeconomic dysfunction, traumatic events that went on in my life, foster care, when I was in foster care, and the culture of poverty and failing school systems. Federal school systems, I'm sorry, let me get back to that. So I grew up in a very poor project here in Columbia, South Carolina. The project was called Roosevelt Village. And we know all around America, if your place you live in with village or greens or something like that, it's probably not the best area to live in. It was known as one of the worst projects in Columbia, South Carolina, where I live. As a matter of fact, they seized the property from the owner in 1994 and they destroyed the property because of the violence that went on, because of the drug dealing, because of the prostitution, the drug using, the robberies, the sexual assaults, and the murders. You are exactly right. Youth often feel forced to come in for therapy by parents, guardians, so they don't want to participate. A lot of times they do not want to participate, but guess what? We have got to make them comfortable and make it somewhat exciting so that they will participate. And I do understand that a lot of times for our youth, court orders and parents making them come is why they come. So basically that's where I grew up at, that type of socioeconomic background, and for me and for many other youths, that could definitely stunt their development, their good development, because it comes with poverty. It comes with having no money, and we know that poverty and not having any money, we know that actually lock us out of certain resources, certain opportunities, so it locks us out because we're a marginalized population. So we begin behind the 8 ball just by where we live, because where we live dictates how our financial situation really is. Dysfunction. I don't want to sound like I'm generalizing or like I'm stereotyping, but the improper socioeconomic situation normally brings dysfunction. I just explained to you about my project, and I talk about in detail in my book about the project that I lived in. There was a lot of murders, a lot of drug dealing, a lot of alcohol, rapes, prostitution, you name it, it all went on. So that brought on a dysfunction in my home. Traumatic events. Of course, we sometimes think the youth, they really don't, they're not old enough to actually have these traumatic events occur in their lives, but they really are. They see it every day, and it could be anything of a million different things. So I'm not going to go very far into that. Foster care. In my book, I also talk about foster care and how foster care was over 30 years ago when I was there. I go back to the same, and now it's called a children's home. Back in those days, it was called an orphanage. I go back every few months to talk to the youth, and it's really changed a lot. But you have to understand the self-concept of these young people, when they're in foster care and don't have parents. The culture of poverty. The culture of poverty really doesn't have anything to do with money, but sometimes it does. The culture of poverty is things that are associated with poverty. Shiny things, big things, reputation, all those kind of things. We talk about failing school system, special education. When I was a young person in school, I was in special education. I was diagnosed with a learning disability and an intellectual disorder. I didn't have, emotional disorder. I'm sorry. And I realize now I didn't have any of those things. I was only bad, but I was diagnosed. And I had to ride this small bus to school every day and stay in these self-contained classes. And as our great scholar Francis Chris Wilson once said, special education self-contained classes are only holding cells until the youth is old enough to go to prison. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about parental social economics, and of course we've all heard of the school to prison pipeline. Did you know the school to prison pipeline was once called the cradle to prison pipeline? And the ACLU, NAACP, and a couple other organizations, they actually got together and said, hey, it's like your parent blaming, so we can't call it, so we don't want you to call it from the cradle to prison, because that seems like it's parent blaming. So they changed the name to the school to prison pipeline, but it's real regardless of what you may want to call it. It's real, and the reason why it's so real is because do you know that a child who's born into poverty, who don't go to daycare at all because their parents can't afford daycare, are 14 times more likely to end up in juvenile justice system and or prison, as opposed to more affluent households that can afford private learning centers, and their children are more likely to never go to prison. And the reason why is because by the third grade, the federal government, for a child that can't read on level by third grade, the federal government, this is one of the factors that they use to decide how many prisons they're going to build in the next 10 years. Because if a young person do not read on level by the third grade, they more than likely they will never read on level. So of course we know that becoming class clown because they can't read very well, becoming violent in school as a ego compensation mechanism occurs a lot of times. And when they're old enough to drop out of school here in South Carolina at 16 years old, they normally drop out of school. They don't have anything to do. They're not employed, and they a lot of times turn to committing crimes, and this in turn have them incarcerated. So we've talked about self-concept, other esteem, and they also sometimes have a habit of looking towards others for validation and looking towards those going back to the culture of poverty, going back to poverty, looking towards those whom they may have grown up with. And we also, and that goes into negative social comparisons. They look at the people around them and their environment as a social comparison to who they should be. And again, a lot of times, those are not the most positive of individuals, and they compensate for their low self-concepts by having an inflated ego. And again, we talk about the non-proficient reading, they act out of school, they go into special education, they become high school dropouts, and they're in the streets for a lot of times, they're in the streets. And for most young African-American males in general, the drug culture is right there, and the drug culture is the easiest way to make money. And I have a video later on in this presentation that will probably better explain why the drug culture for our young men is a huge problem. So we're going to talk about mental health. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't go deep into mental health, but what I will say is that I can't diagnose either. So mental health issues require a diagnosis. So if we're not a psychologist, we can't diagnose those things. We may be human services practitioners, social workers, professional counselors, but we can't diagnose. And let's be very careful not to diagnose. We can only jot the symptoms and send them for a diagnosis if necessary. And it may require psychopharmaceuticals if they are diagnosed, and it may require intensive therapeutic services. Now, if you're a licensed professional counselor or a licensed social worker, of course, you can, um, go in and you can offer those services. Um, behavioral health issues. Behavioral health issue is something that Project Nice Community Development Corporation can help with, and that we do help with, because we found that group work, one-on-one interventions, this helps our youth. This helps our youth if they only have bad behavior and doesn't have a mental health diagnosis. So, and those behavioral health issues can come from their environment, as we talked about, education, as we talked about, and their social networks. The first social network being the home, or the broad social network being their environment. I know here in Columbia, a lot of youth indicate that they normally don't go 15 miles away from their home, away from where they live. And my wife's from Chicago. She told me recently, she said, yeah, that makes perfect sense, because a lot of the Chicago youth, they've never even been downtown. So therefore they don't get that culture. They don't get that culture. All right. So the next one is service model for people. Again, we're going back to that whole person development that we discussed, the psychological, the way our young person thinks, the sociological, the way they interact with other people, the biological. What is their health like? The cultural, what's their history? Where did they grow up? How did they grow up? The financial, and we have a creative curriculum that we call What Does Money Have to Do with It? And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. And the spiritual self. And we all understand spirituality has nothing to do with religion, though it can be connected to your religion. It really has nothing to do with your religion. It's those things that make your soul feel good. Those things that make your soul feel good. All right. So now we'll go to trust. Of course, to build a trust relationship, and we all understand this, we have to be kind to our youth. We have to have empathy for our youth. Though we'll never understand their situation, because their situation is unique, we want to better understand their situation so that we can empathize. We should always have a warm demeanor. We have to actively listen. Actively listen. I have issue with actively listening because I'm a talker. And there's nothing wrong with being a talker. But you have to stay on point, and you have to actively listen. And sometimes you have to hear behind the words. Hear behind the words. We never give false hope. I don't have a job to give anyone. So I never tell our participants, yes, we're going to get you a job. What I tell them is, we're going to do our due diligence in an attempt to get you a job. We never give false hope. And the big I and little you mentality. We're all human beings. We're all the same. Though we do have to establish boundaries. Of course, we have to establish boundaries from the helper and the helpee, but we're all the same. So there's no big I, little you mentality. A lot of times I've had staff members and I've had to let them go because when they assess the youth and interview with the youth and all those kind of things, I hear them talking down to the youth. And I ask, and I always give them multiple opportunities to change that behavior, but I always ask them, hey, have you never made mistakes in your life? I mean, like, if you don't believe that there's redemption for these young people, then Project Nice Community Development Corporation is not the place for you. Next, youth just want to be heard and understood. Again, that active listening piece, and give it back to them, paraphrase it. They want to feel supported. They may have goals, they do have goals and aspirations, but they want to feel supported. They want meaningful involvement. They want to feel trusted. You want to be trusted. They want to be trusted too. And they want to be respected and valued. Going back to that trust piece, when we talk about building that trust relationship, a lot of times we think we just want the youth to trust us. We want youth to trust us so that we can be king, queen, and we can offer these wonderful services to them. And and in a perfect world, everybody walks away, feeling all giddy on the inside. But that's not how it is if we don't trust them as well. At the college that I serve and at Project Niles Community Development Corporation, I tell my students and my participants with my nonprofit, look, you all start out with an A. I believe everything you tell me until I find out what you tell me is not true. So you begin at an A, and it's totally up to you to lose points, B, C, D, F, or whatever the case may be. But they do want to be trusted as well. And I know a lot of times, a lot of our young people, they come into Project Niles Community Development Corporation with the total idea of manipulating the process. I understand that. I get that. I definitely get that. And for that, I still have to give them their dues. And of course, they want to feel respected and valued. If we don't value them as equal participants in the process of offering services to them, it's gonna never work. We don't create plans for them. We create plans with them because they're the ones who's gonna have to do the heavy lifting and work the plan. All right, so expected outcomes after we've done all these things and we've built that trust relationship, and they're with us and everything like that, and they're ready to do the hard work. And of course, I'm not naive. I know that all are not gonna do the hard work. Maybe not even half are gonna put in the hard work. Maybe, I don't know. But I always enter these situations with an open mind that 100% of the youths I see today are going to be highly successful, whatever their idea of success is. And for me, I came to understand that success only means happiness. So what we want to do is we want to reach a decision. We want to resolve all conflicts in that decision-making process. We want to plan approaches. We want to plan the approach to how we're going to make these goals come true. We want feedback, and I need to change that slide because I don't like the term feedback with my youth. I like to call it feed forward because we're going forward. We're not going backwards. And then, of course, lastly, we make that plan, we implement that plan, and every so often we have to do maintenance on that plan. But this is the process. Next, shutdown methods. I know we've all had youth that come into our office and they're really talkative, and then they shut down. They eventually shut down, and once they shut down, it's far harder, far more difficult to get that youth back. So with that, a lot of shutdown methods that we found, one is discuss. And of course, I travel the country and I talk to different individuals, and I look at their training videos, and of course with Project Niles Community Development Corporation, and I notice a lot of times unintentionally the helper shows characteristics of being disgusted with the young person, and it's not intentional. Sometimes we wear our feelings on our face, and and they become disgusted. A lot of times it has to do with the particular crime that was committed. So they come in with this black eye, so to speak, from the beginning. The next one is skepticism. Our youth may come in and they may say things, and you may be very skeptical of them because of their demeanor. they may have a cold, hard demeanor, and they may say, yeah, I want to earn my high school diploma and eventually go to college and, I don't know, become a school teacher. And you may show signs of skepticism, um, because one thing doesn't line up with the other, and that would definitely make a young person shut down. Next is surprise. Why surprise? Because a young person may come in, and you may open their file. Of course, a good caseworker check out the files far before the young person come in, but of course, sometimes we don't have time to do that, and we may open the file when the young person comes in, and we may see that young person was a straight A student in high school. And we may look surprised, or we might even say, wow, you was a straight A student in high school, I'm surprised. We may say those things, and that would definitely shut the young person down. Hesitation, becoming hesitant. I had a participant one time. We paid for his application fee to go to college into the human services program at the college that I served. And he was also getting services from vocational rehabilitation. And 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 when he told the 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 voc rehab worker that he was going to college for human services, he said she looked back, she was hesitant. And she said the reason why she was hesitant is because she has a human services degree, so he would not be able to get any kind of employment with a human services degree. And he came to me, he said, so I'm not going back to school anymore. He just totally shut down. But luckily we were able to get him back on track, and he became a human services graduate. Distractions, a lot of times we can appear very distracted when we're talking to our youth and everything like that. We can appear very distracted, and we don't want to be distracted. And of course, we should never dwell on mistakes and crimes. Never dwell on the mistakes and the crimes that our young people have encountered. Never dwell on those things. When they come to us, we're looking at them as a clean slate. So with that, do anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions? Please put them in the chat box. Well, I'm gonna look at some of the comments in the chat myself, and I'm gonna say some things. The first thing is, Mr. Barlow, I really love your picture that you had up, the meme you had up early, never surrender. I got a kick out of that. I really like that. Okay, one might think of the diagnosis as saying soup, the trauma and adverse childhood experiences. That's right. That's exactly right. Um, that is exactly right. Childhood experiences, all right. Like that gumbo, that child. That's right. That's right. There's so many elements to trauma. There's so many elements to trauma, and sometimes our young people have experienced so many different traumas. Okay, let's go here. Okay, what else do you do? Okay, how do you address countertransference in your staff? That is a very good question. When we talk about transference and countertransference, sometime our staff members, well, we have had staff members who, when a young person begin to open up and begin to discuss their various traumas, we have had staff members to begin with some type of disclosure, partial disclosure. Hey, I've been there as well. So on and so forth. And then it becomes this pity party, they begin to cry with each other. Basically, we let them know that that's counter, and they have become immersed in their own emotions, their own feelings, so that they can avoid transference and counter transference, because those two things will definitely stop the helping process, if that makes any sense to you. Behavior is often the expression of the problem, but often not the problem. How do you differentiate between the two? We know that the presenting problem is only the symptom. It's not the root. It's only the symptom. It's not the root. You know, we have people who come in and they've committed certain crimes, and there's certain discriminatory practices against them, and they want to just simply come in and get a job. They want to just simply come in and reconnect with their family members, or whatever the case may be. But we know that is only a symptom. It is not the root. So what we do is, in our assessment process, we have an assessment questionnaire, and we go into detail with our young people, and we try to drill down to that root, and that's how we differentiate between the two. If I answered your question, give me a thumbs up. If I didn't, I can rephrase what I just said.
Really quick, this is Dolores Shabazz. We're gonna allow people to ask questions. But after you ask your questions, we ask that you review so there's no feedback. And I think we have about a few more minutes.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes before break. Let me see here. I would like to think transference and counter-transference are inevitable, especially with the emphasis we place on empathy and connecting. It is important to the process to experience. This is where supervision is crucial. All right, Michael, you make a very good point, but I have to disagree with you. And I think that and nothing racially charged, but I have to say, I don't know your ethnicity, but I would guess that you're a white man, and you may not really understand the importance of sometimes having a hard nose as it relates to your own emotions and feelings when you're dealing with young people that come from certain social and economic backgrounds. We have to know when to hold and know when to fold, if that makes sense. We have to know when to be that nurturer, and when to say, hey, excuse my language, but I like to cuss, cut the bullshit, cut the bull crap. We have to know when to basically do that, and I don't think that transference nor counter transference is inevitable when offering great services to our young people. So do anyone else have any questions, concerns, comments before we take a 10-minute break?
I would just, oh, wow, that is it. I think I'll just do it.
I think someone was trying to speak.
Yeah, I was trying to tell Michael that Hameen is muted, so you can go ahead and speak now.
Oh,
So,
okay, I was just going to say that what I was speaking to is transference and countertransference, is that their feelings, just like we tell all our clients, like anger is a feeling, happiness a feeling, every feeling is going to happen. So it's not that you don't have the feeling, it's that you need to process it to determine how this is going to impact you and how it's going to drive you. I'm not talking about it as a tool that you're going to use. So I agree with you that you have to sometimes take a hard-nosed approach or call the bullshit flag when it's a bullshit. But I also think that we need to own that if we're feeling something, we need to acknowledge we are feeling something, and how is this impacting me? If this child is starting to feel like my son or my daughter, then am I acting in the same way? Am I being objective? Am I being honest in how I'm treating this individual? Because otherwise it can cross an ethical boundary. So I feel like maybe not every case is going to create a countertransference, but we need to own that it's going to happen. But what we do with that feeling is completely within our control.
I totally agree with you on that. I guess what I was trying to convey is that, of course, we have feelings, and we should be in tune with our own feelings and emotions. That's how we keep our own PF, psychological fortitude, intact. However, I guess what I was saying is that we can't always, because we know transference and countertransference, we mean that they transfer their feelings onto us, and countertransference, we transfer our feelings back onto them. So I guess what I was saying is that we cannot always transfer our feelings and emotions back onto them, if that makes sense, because we may sit there and cry together through the entire helping process. And maybe sometimes that's a good thing. I've never sat there and cried with a young person, but maybe that's a good thing too, sit there and cry, but excuse me, to sit there and cry from time to time. Thank you so much for that, Michael.
Yeah, I think that we're on the same page. I think there was just some of the terminology of, I was thinking of countertransference as not the active process, which is part of, I think, what happens, but that when you start to notice that you're having countertransference, is the way that I feel within myself. Before I act out my actions, I need to process it or own it, like I'm feeling a certain way. So I think that we're on the same page, just working at the dilemma.
I agree totally. And please let me make this clear to everybody as well. I'm not the utmost scholar in the helping profession. I don't think any of us are. I'm not the utmost scholar. And when I teach, when I offer service to my young people that has had justice contact, and when I do my trainings and presentations, I learn and grow as well. So again, thank you for that, Michael. And with that, we're 54 minutes into the presentation, and we finished with module 1. So I guess we could take a 10-minute break. How does that sound, everybody? All right. See y'all in 10. All right, so we're back, and we're going into module 2. Also, I realized why the slides were automatically going forward. The reason why is because previously I recorded this entire workshop. However, because of audio difficulties, we had only muted the audio so that I could speak to you guys live. So, but the timer was still on. So hopefully we have that situation corrected. So module 2, encouraging discovery. We're going to talk about the importance of discovery, the importance of self-examination, barriers that one may have to discovering, the locus of control. I call it who's to blame, because we know the internal locus of control is when we look within ourselves, and the external locus of control is when we look into our environment or those around us. Handling disappointments. A lot of our young people have issue with handling disappointments, and of course that goes back to emotional intelligence, mastery of oneself. We're going to talk a little bit about brand building. How do our young people build their brand and build a different brand? Because a lot of times they come in with a certain brand. A lot of times they come in with a certain brand, and that's a beautiful dog, Mike. But they come in with a certain brand, and that brand may not be conducive to their growth and development going forward. And of course, our ultimate goal is to help them to enrich their own lives so that they can be productive and contributing members of our society. The next one is becoming self-actualized. Of course, we all want to become self-actualized as relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then methods to promote discovery. These are things that we're going to talk about, and let's see how this PowerPoint works out now. All right, so it's not going anywhere. Okay, here we go. I have it. So the assessment finds a Project NOS Community Development Corporation as it relates to our young people. And I also discussed this in my book, From Prison Walls to College Halls, Achieving Success in the Face of Adversity, as it relates to my own characteristics in terms of these things. We found that a lot of our young people are selfish. And being selfish, that's totally normal for young people, because that's what young people are, right? We were all selfish at one time, because our knowledge is what we call fluid. And somewhere around the age of 21 to 25, it becomes more crystallized. But our knowledge is fluid, and we want what we want when we want it. I call it the my syndrome, as a tribute to Freddie Jackson. His song, my. I'm not sure you guys have ever heard that or not before, but I actually and my wife told me not to crack any of those corny jokes as I give this presentation, but I just can't help myself sometimes. Blaming others, that again, that external locus of control, we blame others. A lot of times our young people, we blame others for the things that we do, things that we can control. Of course, we can't control everything, right? And we'll talk about that a little later when we talk about a SWOT analysis for young people. But our young people have a habit of not taking accountability when they first come in for very many things. And of course, those verbal and nonverbal messages that they receive growing up as children, those negative verbal and nonverbal messages, which is what we call life scripts. Those verbal and nonverbal messages they receive growing up as children. Also that bleeds into the injunctions, those verbal and nonverbal messages they receive from their parents. One is for the environment and one is for the parents. Those parents that may give off negative messages to our young people, and I'm sure unintentional. I found that most of our parents, they're great people, they're wonderful people. However, they may not have the tools to foster and encourage their children in a positive direction. They just may not have the tools. So at Project NOS Community Development Corporation, that's why we also offer services to the family members, and we a lot of times frame it as them taking ownership of their children's process, and they become more receptive to that, because of course we know everything is how you frame it. Everything is about how you frame it. We've learned that they've had lack of compassion, lack of love for humanity. And of course, that's normal. Again, I discussed that in my book as well, as relates to my own life growing up. You know, lack of compassion, sometimes compassion can be detrimental in certain environments. Love for humanity can be detrimental for a lot of young people in certain environments. Lack of healthy relationships, family, school, and associates. We've found that most of our young people, and I don't have numbers right in front of me right now. I did, when I recorded it, I did have the numbers, but I don't have numbers in front of me right now. A large number of our young people that come through Project NOS Community Development Corporation, they have a lack of healthy relations with their parents, whether they come from a one-parent or two-parent household. They have a lack of healthy relationships with administrators, teachers. There's all of these people in the schools and their associates, because a lot of times their associates are not the greatest people to be around. We found that a lot of our young people who have had contact with the criminal justice system, and they and they have committed more serious crimes, they a lot of times have older associates. They also have, they have adult associates whom they learn, I like to call it their craft, who they learn their craft from. Sporadic decision making, lack of goal and preparation. We know young people, and this is young people, whether they've been involved in the criminal justice system or not. They make quick decisions. They make hasty decisions. They don't prepare for things that they do a lot of times. And of course, this is a hindrance, and this is something that we help our young people with Project Niles Community Development Corporation to help them to make better decisions by way of thinking through their decisions. We use a metacognition method of thinking about why you think, how you think. And of course, they have unrealistic views on finances, A lot of our young people, when they come through, they think in order to just be able to live as adults, they have to make $150,000 a year. And I don't know where all of you guys are, the living wage for all of you guys, but in South Carolina, that couldn't be the furthest from the truth. That couldn't be the furthest from the truth. And then again, they sometimes have inflated egos, and they use those inflated egos. And they use those inflated egos to compensate for low self-concept. And the way that we gauge low self-concept with my nonprofit organization is, we know that self-esteem, self-concept comes from achievements, things that you've achieved in life. That's the only way to build self-concept, is the way that is how much you've achieved in life. So a lot of times our young people, they really can't think of a lot of things they've achieved in life. And with that, they have this inflated ego as being really tough, or they may have a realistic view on their own, I don't want to say on intelligence, on how brilliant they really are. They may amplify these things, that being tough, a lot of our males, they amplify the fact that they have a lot of young ladies in their lives. That's a part of that. That's part of that. That's that inflated ego, things that they use to compensate for having a low self-concept. And of course, lastly, self-regulation. They have poor impulse control, and that's relatively normal, and within boundaries for young people to have poor impulse control, because they learn those things throughout the development of the life course. So manifesting your own destiny. I believe that's chapter 12 in my book, From Prison Walls to College Hall, Manifesting Your Own Destiny. And the way to manifest your own destiny is to take control of your own life. And how do we take control of our own life? We take control of our own lives by way of making the best decisions possible. Going back to the last slide, making the best decisions possible, thinking about the decisions that we make, thinking about A, B, and C. If this is likely to happen, this is like, so how do I craft my life course? So that's basically manifesting your own destiny. Goal setting, we actually teach our young people about goal setting, and of course we use SMART goals, because we found that that's the best way to actually, that's the best way to follow a certain path that our young people want to be on. Self-motivation. At Project Niles, we don't believe that we can motivate others. We don't believe that. We believe that three things bring motivation: instinct, will, and drive. Instinct, will, and drive. Fraud thought that it was totally biological. Motivation was totally biological, and by way of arousal, mental, psychological arousal, that our adrenaline begin to flow and we become motivated. Motivation only means become mobile, be mobile. And but a doctor called Washington, he came, Watson, I'm sorry, he came through and he said, well, yeah, there are biological components to it, but it's actually 90% psychological, and those psychological components are instinct, will, and drive. Now we know instinct. We're all born with instinct. You don't have to teach a baby how to suck and cry. We all have instinct. For most of us, we have a will or a want to do some things better, to achieve some great things in life. We all have a will or a want. I have a will and a want to be able to achieve great things in life. I've been to many states throughout America performing trainings, and I want to eventually go abroad. I want to eventually go internationally. So of course I have those wants, right? But that piece that a lot of us miss is that drive piece, And at Project Knox Community Development Corporation, we try and help our individuals to get that drive, that get up and go, that things is actually going to make them mobile. Self-examination. We have to examine ourselves, right? We have to examine ourselves, examine our motives, examine exactly what do we want in life, to be able to become motivated and to manifest your own destiny. Self-care practices. We know how important self-care is, especially as health professionals. We understand it because it can become very stressful from time to time. As a matter of fact, when I get off of here today, I'm on my way to Arlington, Virginia, Prince George County, Maryland, and then on into DC, and I'm going to spend 2 weeks debriefing from these past 7 months of offering services this year. So we know the importance of it, and what we do is we actually talk to our young people, find out things that they enjoy doing. And of course, here I go with a corny joke again. A lot of our young people indicate that their self-care is smoking marijuana. I don't know about your state, but in my state, that's illegal, and that can cause a laundry list full of problems again. And again, we're going to talk about building your own brand, and we're going to discuss discovering self all over again, that locus of control. We keep going back to that locus of control because it's very important for our young people to become accountable for their own actions, look within themselves, personal growth, and again, becoming self-actualized. All right, character matters. Character matters so much because people may not give you an opportunity if your character isn't, I guess, up to par, for lack of better words. Ego defense mechanisms is a huge character default in a lot of our young people, and those ego defense mechanisms goes back to the slide before last, where we actually discussed inflated egos and compensation. So ego defense mechanisms, things that make our young people feel uncomfortable, they kick in a lot of times that ego defense mechanism, and they get to a point where they become offended. They become angry sometime. I don't know about you guys, but I've actually had some young people attempt to attack me before, and that's all right. I grew up fighting all my life, so I'm pretty good at de-escalating things verbally these days rather than physically. But our young people, a lot of times, they do use those ego defense mechanisms, and of course that plays into repression, the I don't care attitude. They think they can't do something before they even try it. A lot of times they'll say, I don't care, hey, so I've noticed that you read on the 3rd grade level, and we may need to, get you into a program like here in Columbia, South Carolina, the Richland Library, they offer diploma programs where young people who have dropped out of school, they can go and get the diploma rather than a GED. And when you discuss, they'll minimize it. They'll make it appear as though it really doesn't matter if they, if they can read or not, as though they don't care about anything. And it's our responsibility to break that shell, so to speak, to get them to open up. And that goes back to the original assessment of all the things that we should attempt to do to break that shell before we get to the point of discussing education, vocation, familial issues, environmental factors, just all those things. We should have already had that shell broken. And of course, a lot of times our young people, they're in denial. It's not important. It's not important to get a high school diploma. It's not important to go to college. It's not important to learn life skills. None of these things are important because I'm doing all right. And going back to that repression, even for a lot of our young people who've been in the Department of Juvenile Justice 2, 3, and even 4 times, they indicate, I can do time. I don't care. It does not matter. I can do time. I'll go back. I'm only going to do 6 months here, a year there, 4 months here. I'm young. I can do it, and that is a major problem with a lot of our young people. And I hate to admit it, but for some of our young people, we never get to crack that shell, and we can never quite get through to the inner them, because I believe that we're all creating the best of modes, the best of symmetry. And I believe that we're all good people, and none of us are born with bad behavior. I think that we may have sometime with our mental health issues and not having the proper therapeutic value or the proper pharmaceuticals or whatever it may take, that our young people, they may not be able to reach that goal. But for the most part, with just our young people who have behavioral issues, we can in fact reach that goal. All right, the locus of control, as we talked about 2 or 3 times earlier, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the locus of control because we already know what it is. The locus of control is the internal locus of control. Once again, just for sake of conversation, the internal locus of control is looking within ourselves, looking within our own lives. And there's a lot that goes into the internal locus of control. And one of the main things that I found for me and a lot of my young people is reflection, sincere and honest reflection practices. And a lot of our young people have no idea how to even begin the reflective practice, right? So it's our responsibility to guide them. We can't teach them to reflect, but to guide them to be able to reflect. I began having some of my young people who actually write pretty well to create a memoir. What was the most impactful time of your life? And I show them a memoir. As a matter of fact, it's a chapter in my book. It's called A Decade of Deliverance. And I share that with them, that for my memoir, the most impactful time of my life was about 4 years into my prison sentence, when I met a fellow inmate who basically did turn my life around by way of reflective practices, by way of helping me learn to read. By the way, I was functionally illiterate. I read on a 4th grade level until I was 24 years old. And in prison, a fellow inmate taught me how to read. And I went into remedial classes. I earned my GED when I was 27 years old. And when I came home, of course, I went to college and earned all these wonderful degrees and everything like that. So he helped to turn my life around, and A Decade of Deliverance talks about that, because that was the most impactful time of my life. And those are things that I reflect on frequently to empower myself to keep going forward. My time in juvenile justice, I spent a year in juvenile justice for selling heroin, and of course I was sentenced to 20 years. I was sentenced to 20 years at 19 years old for selling crack cocaine. I spent 13 years and 7 months in the Department of Corrections, and the last 10 years, that 13, 7 months was really an eye opener. So I frequently reflect on my life, starting from that point to where I am today. So once again, we ask our young people who can write pretty well, read pretty well, to just write a memoir of the most impactful time of their lives. And most of the time, they write about the negative things in their lives, and then we try and flip it and say, okay, write a memoir about the happiest time of your life. And when they read it back to themselves and in our support groups, some of them have enough courage to read it to others, and I think it works very well. Of course, nothing is 100% foolproof. Nothing is 100% foolproof. So why is my thing not working? Oh, why is my, there it is. Okay, so happiness is the goal. So how do we get our young people to see that there is happiness? I normally like to joke with my young people and say, hey, do you ever walk out the door and see blue clovers, green diamonds, and purple hearts? And of course they don't understand what I'm talking about a lot of times until we go through our module of success. And again, to me, success is only being happy. Success doesn't have a dollar amount to it. Success is being happy with who you are and your situation. So what we do is we focus on positive things. So, and of course, in the health profession, we call it strength-based case management. In the helping profession, we call it strength-based case management. But it's basically we focus on the positive things in life. What do you do well? What happy times have you had in your life? Just all those kind of things. And we hope that would transition into an optimistic paradigm, into an optimistic outlook on life, no matter where you came from. It doesn't matter where you came from. I'm living proof of it. Doesn't matter where you come from. Once again, I come from one of the worst projects here in Columbia, South Carolina. One of the worst. It was knocked down by the city of Columbia because of the drugs, the murders, the prostitution, the alcohol, just everything, the substandard conditions. It was the first project they knocked down here in Columbia, South Carolina. So it is possible for a young person to come from a certain socioeconomic background, a certain environment, and to be able to enjoy an optimistic paradigm. I look at the world in a whole different light. I can remember growing up, being in prison, and now I see the world totally different. And a lot of times that comes from experiencing different things in life, quality things in life. I tell my young people, you have to live in the here and now. We can't live in the past. Of course, there's past traumas, past hurts, things that was render us short from our progression, from living in the here and now. But that's where people that's more educated than myself in the mental health field, psychologists and licensed master social workers and licensed professional counselors come in, and we do have a network with those helping professionals to help our young people to better heal from past traumas. So once again, I'm not qualified to do intensive therapeutic services like CBT, RET, and those kind of things. I cannot practice those things, and I do not try to because it's unethical to try to. And one thing I know about young people and adults alike, when they come to you, they could be so broken. If you if you drop them trying to offer services you're not qualified for, you may break them in so many pieces, you can never put them back together again. We're not working on cars, watches, or houses. You can't pay for a life. You can't rebuild a life. I'm not saying you can't rebuild a life, but you may not be able to repair a life when a life is broken in so many pieces, if that makes sense. Spend quality time with loved ones. A lot of our young people, when they come through, they have shattered, broken, or at least disconnected relationships with people they love. And they do love their family members, and they love others, and their family members and others do love them, but there's a disconnect there. So we do what we call family connections, and it works very well. Our family connections process works very well, and we basically, they connect with one another, and we exhort our young people to spend as much time as possible, especially with their parents and their grandparents. And the reason why with their grandparents is because their grandparents are the historians. Their grandparents are the historians. They can know where they came from before they were even born. Their parents are the historians, and that goes back to that whole personal development piece as relates to the cultural self. The cultural self. Your culture is very important. Your history is very important because your history, your culture dictates why you think the way you think, why you see the things why you see things the way that you see them. And we have to forgive those who hurt us. Now that's one aspect of what we do that we hadn't quite perfected yet. To get our young people to actually be able to forgive those who hurt us, And of course, we've heard the old saying, you can forgive, you don't have to forget. And you definitely don't have to forget because you don't want to forget, because if you forget the hurt may actually repeat itself over and over again because you're not willing to deflect or shield against that. But we do want our young people to find forgiveness in their heart for those who hurt them, and we want them to seek forgiveness for the people they hurt. We're actually piloting, let me say it like that, piloting with a brand that we created of restorative justice. So we're piloting that right now, but ARP, Assessment, Research, and Planning, an organization that we're partnered with, they'll publish the results when they get enough information of how well that's working for us. And they have to identify what they love and do as much of it as possible. They have to identify what they love. Of course, things that they love that are positive, things that they love that's not going to end them back up in a jailhouse in those bracelets, those handcuffs, or things that's going to hurt other people, right? But identify things that they love, this, for lack of better words, that's good, that's wholesome, and things that they can do, and it won't hurt them in the least or hurt those around them. And of course, we know that's a part of autonomy, self-actualization, is to do whatever you want to do as long as you don't hurt or violate the rights of other people. All right. So next, what is building a brand? We've all built a brand, whether we like our brand or not, whether our brand is conducive or not. We've all built a brand. Our young people they built brands. We have a thing in our support groups as well. We say, okay, Johnny, when you look at Bill, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? And this is an indicator of what brand they have built. they have built for themselves. How do we see us? I mean, how do others see us? And not how we see ourselves. It's how others see us. I remember when I took minority psychology in college, and the professor gave us he gave us something. He said, "Well, think about it like this. When Charlie Manson, I know a lot of you are too young to know anything about Charlie Manson, but he said when Charlie Manson was going to court, his lawyer told the judge and the jury that Charlie Manson lacks Bing Crosby because he wanted the jury to see Charlie Manson in a different light. And of course, Bing Crosby was like the best thing going with all his tours overseas and everything like that. It didn't work well for Charlie Manson. He still received life in prison, but that's the basic idea of building a brand. It's how you want others to see you, and what do we do for others to see us in a certain light. And of course, against perception in the mind of others, it's not your perception. It's the perception in the mind of others. So we work with our young people on that really closely, because we think building your brand is so important. Building your brand is so important because people may not give you opportunities. And you may think it's because I come from a certain place in life, a certain socioeconomic background. I come from a certain family. I can't get an opportunity, but it's really because other people's perception of you is different than your perception of yourself. And I think it's so important that we build our brand, like Pepsi Cola or Trader Joe's or whoever. You know what I'm saying? They spend a lot of time building their brand. I spent a lot of time building my brand. When I came home from prison, I had a record holding me back from everything. So I had to rebuild my brand. So I began to dress different. I began to speak different. I went to college and I found different role models, and I took a piece from everybody. And eventually I was able to build my own brand. And that's my personal brand, of course, and my professional brand, Project Knox Community Development Corporation. We use various marketing tools to build our brand as it relates to our mission, vision, expected outcomes, but also our values and beliefs. And our values and beliefs, our values and beliefs come strictly from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was written in 1946, I believe, at the Geneva Convention, and it begins, "We the human family." So, some question for self that we give our young people, and this is something that we can grow from as well. What are my goals? What are my goals? What do I want to accomplish in life? What exactly do I want to accomplish in life? The next thing is, what do I value? What do I value? A lot of times we just don't know the things that we value. I was just talking to a gentleman this morning about African American male issues, and we understood that we a lot of times go into jobs or careers that doesn't line up with our values, it doesn't line up with things that we enjoy doing or anything like that. We strictly go for the money. And one thing that I've learned is that if your job doesn't line up with your values, if your personal life doesn't line up with your values, you're going to be so unhappy a lot of times you may not stay there anyway. So now you're back on the job search once again, or whatever the situation. The next one, what am I passionate about? What do I love? What do I love doing? I know for me, my life scripts, how I grew up, spending time in DJJ, spending time in prison. For me, I was passionate about helping other people. I was passionate about helping people not having to go through all of the horrible things I had to go through once I came out of prison. And I discussed that in my book as well. All the traumas, all the hurts, all the pains, all the disappointments that came along with being a person with legal challenges, a person with a criminal record, you know. Oh man. So, but anyway, there's a video that I'm gonna show a little later that's gonna bring clarity to what I'm talking about in terms of that. And then we have to ask, what motivates me? What drives me to move forward? What exactly is my drive? You know, a lot of people have different drives. Some people drive is strictly make money. Some people actually drive is to put others in fear. They want people to fear them, and a lot of times that comes because they believe that no one will ever respect them. So we have to change that outlook as well. But yeah, it's important to understand what motivates me. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to go forward? You know, what's my premise? I tell my wife all the time when she wants me to do something, I say, what's my motivation? So yeah, but anyway, you know, and what's my gifts and talents? We all have gifts and talents. We all do things very well. We all do things well. We have to pinpoint our gifts and talents. We have to pinpoint those things to be able to go forward, to be able to move forward. We have to be able to pinpoint, okay, what do I do well? And the thing is that, and focus on what I do well and not necessarily what I do not do well. For instance, I suffered a cerebral vascular accident some years back, and I still suffer from a certain degree. I've got a lot better, but I still suffer from loss of some working memory and loss of some information processing ability. That's why you may hear my voice crack as I speak, because the longer I speak, I become tired. My throat begins to constrict and all those kind of things, right? But my gift and talent is the fact that I'm genuine, the fact that I'm sincere, the fact that I have research and experience behind what I do. And this is why individuals call me all around the country to speak, because I focus on what I do well. I focus on my gifts and my talents. And again, I think my biggest talent is the fact that I'm genuine. The fact that I don't hold hands, kick cans, I don't go along to get along, and I don't put myself in a place that I don't belong, if that makes sense to you. I talk about things that I know, and one thing that I do know is youth services. And the reason why is because I have life experiences, and just a side note, my entire staff, with the exception of Mr. Lawrence, who's our executive director, my entire staff are men and women who has been to prison and who have went to college and became degreed in a biopsychosocial type field. So and a lot of us have certifications and licensures. Even the two that do not have degrees, they're what you call peer support specialists. They're credentialed in peer support. So I think that's one of the strengths as well of my nonprofit organization. Because in the words of the great Glenn E. Martin, founder of Just Leadership US, which is the biggest nonprofit reentry organization in America, people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. Okay, next, autonomy, self-actualization. What is autonomy? We know what autonomy is. We just talked about autonomy. Autonomy is when you make your own decisions, and you make your own decisions according to evidence, proof and evidence, of course. We don't want to just make willy-nilly decisions. And with making those decisions, we don't violate the rights of other people. We don't violate the rights of other people. How important is it to be autonomous? Is it important to be autonomous, or is it not important to be autonomous? And that lies within the person. I know some people, they would rather take direction in every aspect of their lives and never get to a point to where they can direct themselves. I've met individuals like that. I know individuals like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't take people rights away from them to go to jail. We don't take people rights away from them to do anything that they want to do. Our only job is to guide those in a direction that can be conducive to how they want to live their lives, and also open up new avenues as to where they can actually look at themselves and say, I can see myself going in this direction as opposed to this direction in life. And there was a time when I was at a crossroads as well as to what direction I really wanted to take in life. Psychological maturity, our psychological fortitude, our young people and our older people as well, because we have at-risk youth, at-risk adults, we have incarcerated youth, incarcerated adults, and we have formerly incarcerated youth and formerly incarcerated adults. But the goal is to mature psychologically. Social engineering, knowing how to navigate through society, and minimize as many risks as we possibly can. And that only comes from knowing how to comport ourselves as we navigate through this society, or as Prince said, this maze called life, this thing called life. Resolving conflict appropriately. That's really big. A lot of our young people come through. I mean, I'm sure y'all young people as well, they don't quite have the skills to resolve conflict appropriately. I remember my mother used to say, boy, you can't think your way out of a wet paper bag. I remember she used to tell me those things. And basically what she was saying is that you don't think before you act. You don't think before you act. And one thing I've learned throughout my years is that there's nothing wrong with becoming angry, because you can channel that anger. There's something wrong with being mad, because you cannot channel madness. And that's something really important. And our young people, for the most part, they actually do learn to resolve their conflicts more appropriately. Of course, sometimes they may backslide here and there, but they do learn to resolve their financial sophistication. We've talked about that about 2-3 times during this slide. Why? Because what does money have to do with it? Money is one of the most important things to a young person who comes from a lower social economic background. We're taught that money means everything. Money is the answer to every problem, and we have to get as much money as we possibly can, or we're not going to be able to live and survive. Cultural understanding, again, go understanding your history, understanding where you came from, and that will help you to understand better why you think the way you think, why you comport yourself the way you comport yourself. Your culture, your history is of paramount importance, and we actually do an entire module on cultural differences, and we have that conversation about various cultures and cultural differences, and a lot of times our young people get it. And I'm very grateful for that. And of course, respecting the rights, and of course, all of that, respecting the rights of others while making your own choices. And that's something that we discussed from the beginning. All right. Questions, comments, concerns. And we are exactly 46 minutes into this hour module. So do we have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Can you push mute?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
No problem. I was just going to say, again, anybody that wants to speak, just unmute yourself. After you finish, put your microphone back on mute to ask or add to the conversation. We appreciate you all. Or if you want to use that reactions button on the bottom to raise your hand, so more than one person doesn't try to speak at one time, that would be great.
I want to say that we're halfway into or we're halfway done with the presentation. And, you know, I like to call myself an expert in at-risk youth and their families. I was a former juvenile probation officer, and in my clinical work, I work with at-risk children and their families. And you've reframed, you know, a lot of the work, you know, that I've done with this particular population. Specifically, you know, when you talked about handling disappointment, you know, that's a wonderful reframe for labels that we've given, such as oppositional defiance and conduct disorder. So I really, you know, appreciate the information that you're giving us, you know, negative social comparisons. Interesting to me and sickening at the same time is the fact that you said that they built prisons based on elementary school students' reading level in the 3rd grade. Sickening. And it's our fault, you know, with regards to the school systems that our children, you know, aren't making the mark. I also love the whole manifesting your own destiny, building your brand. I love those reframes and intend to use them, you know, in my work. So thank you again, you know, good work. Thank you. Oh, and I'm reading your comments, Michael. Thanks so much. Looks like Brianna has a question. How would you respond to youth that are so focused on getting money and earning legal money feels like a slow process to them? Good question.
Yeah, that is, I got it, Doris. That is a great question, and my basically we'll talk more about that in our what does money have to do with it. That'll be module 4. But just for sake of right now, we just basically as Lucretia just said, reframe terminologies, of course, because our young people may not understand certain terminologies. So we take it to the street with them, and we show them how slow money is show money. You know, those kind of things, right? You know, those kind of things like, you know, look around you. And for every person out there who committed an armed robbery, who commit drug dealing crimes, or whatever they may do to get that fast money, because I'm glad you asked that question, Brianna, because that is huge. That's why I keep going back to finances, because that is huge. Because of course, once again, they think money's everything, and they think as much money as they can get is everything. They don't understand a living wage. They don't understand just being able to, you know, take care of your family, take care of yourself, make, you know, like I tell my young people, you know, you can afford to make you a bowl of grits and leave a little gravy on the plate. You know what I'm saying? Those kind of things. So those are the kind of things that we discuss in our life skill modules and in our, I guess we would call them support groups, but I call them our real talk groups. And those are things that we actually discuss. And again, we'll talk about that further in our last module when we talk about what does money have to do with it. Yep. So we're 51 minutes in. So hold up. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Okay, cool beans. Let me see if there's any more questions here. The more distance expects conflict. Yeah. And let's see, how would you respond to youth folks? Okay. So that's Brianna, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. I have this information. Sorry to have to leave. I would like a copy of the handout. Thank you. All right, so I guess now we'll take our 10-minute break and we'll resume in 10 minutes. See y'all then. All right, so we're back. Had a few technical difficulties once again. That previous recording, we're working our way through that situation. So I was asked to go back to the Manifesting Your Own Destiny piece by Miss Lucretia. So Miss Lucretia, talk to us.
Absolutely. I absolutely. Oh, there's. Is there still feedback? Is there still feedback? Okay. I asked to go back to this for a few moments, simply because this is a really, for me as a therapist, a really great concept. It's a wonderful concept, but as a clinician, this is one of the things that I have trouble with when engaging with our youth. They've lost their autonomy at the point that they see us. They've been told what to do by every system that the court can throw at them. And so at the point that they come to us and we're trying to impart this concept on them, it's like, well, first of all, I don't have a control over my own life, you know, by way of me seeing you. And so I guess that it's just really difficult. And I'm sure that I'm speaking for, you know, a lot of us on the screen to impart this concept to youth, because at the point they come to us, they've lost their autonomy. So are there any suggestions on what we can do, you know, to make us, I don't know, more believable, more trusting, so that we can help them build their own brand or support them while they build their own brand?
I think there's a number of things that we can do to further encourage them to get back on the road to autonomy. And one of those things is, as we discussed earlier, just being genuine with them, and letting them know, hey, you're a part of this process. There's nothing I'm going to do without you. There's nothing I'm going to do without you buying into the process. And of course, we discuss affirmations like your life. You are life. You know, you're worthy. You can make your own choices. You know, I'm only here as a guide. You can make your own choices. And that is a huge issue in terms of offering services to young people and helping them to manifest their own destiny, becoming autonomous and having that motivation and going into the building your brand and, you know, just all of those kind of things. That is a huge issue because, of course, by the time they get to us, and I use this word loosely, they're broken, totally broken. And of course, human nature a lot of times is we focus on the negative as opposed to the positive. You know, the negative totally outweighs the positive as relates to things that we've encountered in our lives. And like you said, they've been told what to do a lot of times, and especially if they've been in those juvenile correctional facilities, they've been treated as children and adults, if that makes sense, at the same time. Children in terms of given total directive as to everything that you need to do, and treated as adults as relates to being thrown into solitary confinement and sometimes being beaten, which is something that went on here in South Carolina. As a matter of fact, our governor is going to make an announcement today as to what he's going to do with our director for the Department of Juvenile Justice today. But, you know, and in institutions around America, juveniles and adults, you know, there's sometimes sexual abuse that goes on as well, whether male on female, male on male, female on male, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of sexual abuse. So you're right. Those traumas from not being able to make your own decisions, those traumas for being severely punished for small infractions, it is incredibly difficult for the young person to even be able to formulate in their minds, yeah, I'm going to control my own destiny and I'm going to do it in a positive way. I can remember when I went, one of the foster homes I went into when I was in, at that time, it was called the orphanage. Now it's a children's home. I was sent back so many times by the families, and some of those families, they were really horrible because they get checks and they get a bunch of, as many kids as possible to live in their homes to get, excuse me, to get these checks. And And when I did finally get into a home that I could see now, that was a great home where I probably could have done some wonderful things because they were able to afford me opportunities, I was not willing to take those steps to do better. So in my mind, making my own decisions, manifesting my own destiny, um, was to act out so horribly until I was sent back to the orphanage. So 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 that is incredibly difficult, and I think that, of course, being genuine and letting them take part in the process, but I think just as important is is understanding that each young person is totally different. Even though they may have been through some similar things, they're totally different. And and I guess the best answer I can give is according to the character of that young person, the thought process of that young person, we have to create our own framework, help them to create their own framework, because we know the theories and the models stay the same. The only thing that changes is the framework in accordance to the participant, if that makes sense. If I asked you a question, I hope I did.
No, you absolutely did. You gave you gave us a framework, treatment considerations. Trauma. Being a trauma-informed practitioner is big in these parts, and so you gave us some things to consider with regard to how to get these folks to relabel themselves, and still not be fake. They can relabel themselves. They can learn to code switch, because that is absolutely a skill. So they can still, present themselves in a matter of their branding, but still feel connected to where they came from. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And just briefly, because I know we have to move forward, but just briefly, as it relates to code switching, which is a skill, I practice code switching at work, not at my nonprofit organization. I keep it real, and we also have conversations. The staff members, we have conversations about code switching and how far do we go with that with our young people and things like that, because we don't want them to feel like they have to lose their authenticity. I sometimes go to the college with Jordans and jeans and jerseys on, because just for me, and sometimes I go in wearing dashikis. I mean, and because just for me, it's unfair. It's reality, but it's unfair. I believe that we have to assimilate to the popular culture, the power structure culture, and not be able to be ourselves, even though we're good, decent people. So I'm glad you mentioned code switching, because that's very important. Yes, ma'am. So let's see if I can get us forward here a little. Okay, so now we're module 3, connecting needs with services through purposeful advances. Purposeful advances. And what I mean by purposeful advances is that sometimes we may spend a lot of times on some things that may be important to us, but not important to the young person. And the young person may lose interest. So of course, we're going to talk about use of motivational interviewing techniques. We've all heard that, motivational interviewing techniques. And one thing that we do at Project Knowledge Development Corporation is we change the model. We don't use traditional helping because we've learned that the traditional models, things that we've learned throughout our degree fields and our experiences, is, these trainings and stuff like that, that we really are not making a huge impact a lot of times, if that makes sense to you. So we actually changed the model. We're going to talk about working with and not for the young person. We talked about that earlier in the slide. We're going to go further into it. Understand the whole person development a little better. We're going to talk about creating a strategic plan, because we have to create a strategic plan sometime with our young people. And we're going to talk about a SWOT analysis for our youth, using the stages of change model, and when your pyramid is turned upside down. I'm really proud of when your pyramid is turned upside down, because that is something that I created. And once we talk to our young people about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and get them to understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then we turn that pyramid upside down and we see what happens from there. So I'm really excited about that. So motivational interviewing. Of course, we don't manage our young people. We help our young people. You manage things. Sometimes we call ourselves case managers. I don't use that term, because we manage things. We don't manage people. We help people. And if we're in leadership positions, we lead people. We do not manage people. We help people. We help people to manage their own lives. Of course, that's what we learn in case management. But sometimes we still use the word manager, and believe it or not, a word can put fear into an individual. A word can make a person feel inferior. And the video that we're going to watch a little later talks a little bit about that as it relates to filling out job applications, the fear of a word. And we use a strength-based approach that we talked about before, and we're not going to go deep into it. We focus on their strengths. We don't focus on their weaknesses. And we all have weaknesses. And a lot of times when we build on those strengths, we can mitigate those weaknesses, if that makes sense. Meaningful disclosure. Now, we talked about that before. When do we disclose? When do we disclose to our young people? Or do we disclose at all? It's been my experience that if I disclose too much about my personal life, my young people start to try and use that against me, as if I can't help them. Then if I don't disclose enough, they a lot of times think that, man, you don't know my struggle. You don't know what I'm dealing with. You don't know what I'm going through. So it's always very important to understand those boundaries as it relates to, do you disclose at all? Do you partially disclose? When do you disclose? How much do you disclose? And those kind of things. And you appraise your directives. We know that if a young person come in, they're fully mobile. If they're fully mobile, then we don't give any directives at all whatsoever. We just guide them as relates to their thought process, because they're mobile. They can understand. They can comprehend what's going on. They know it needs to be done. They just have some little quirks as to where they don't know quite how to achieve that objective. But if a person is partially mobile, and we have individuals who partially mobile, they understand what's going on, but they really don't have that motivation piece, or whatever the case may be. Of course, we use partial directives. We partially direct them. And we have those who come in who are totally immobile. And I'm not talking about mental health, though we have some of that as well. Or we might have congenial or developmental disabilities, people who come in. And so we're not talking about those right now. We're talking about individuals who in the street we call, and of course, don't become offended when I say this, because I know we love our young people. We don't like people saying bad things about our young people, but this is just a street terminology. We have those that come in and they stuck on stupid. They stuck on what you call stuck on stupid. They just don't want to understand. They just don't put any effort to understand at all whatsoever. And that goes back to breaking that shell with them. And sometimes it works, and unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't. And if it always worked, then we would probably cut the juvenile justice population in America by 30, 40, 50%. Okay, and understand that everyone brings value. I can't express that enough. that we have to understand that our young people bring value the same as we bring value. Our young people bring value same as we bring value. We bring attitudes. Our young people bring attitudes. We bring knowledge. Our young people bring knowledge. The only thing is that we try to bring solutions, and young people, they come for solutions. Or as someone indicated, they come because their parents want solutions, or the judge has ordered them to come and get solutions. So we have to understand that everybody brings value to the relationship, and we collaborate with our youth. We talk to them. We get to know them. We get to know their ideas, their views, their goals, their aspirations. And the thing is that they may come in and they may want to be, their only aspiration may be being a drug dealer. So then we have to say, okay, so why do you want to be a drug dealer? What are the positive aspects to that? Because there's positive aspects to selling drugs. I mean, come on now. We got to be totally honest with ourselves. It brings other esteem. It brings money. You can do things that you want to do with it. I mean, when I was 18 years old, I had 2 Cadillacs and a Mercedes-Benz selling drugs. But of course, it landed me a long prison sentence. So therefore, it really wasn't worth it. But all in all, we have to collaborate with our youth. And we have to guide them to create a service plan. We have to guide them to create a service plan. We don't create a service plan for them. They create that service plan. We just guide them in the right direction. We just facilitate the process. And a lot of times when our young people believe and know that they've created a plan, they'll be more likely to stick to it. A lot of times, of course, nothing is absolute except math. That's one thing that I've learned, but we know they'll be more likely to adhere to their service plans if they believe that they created the process themselves. All right, cognitive distortions. And I actually saw in the chat box that one individual comment about cognitive distortion. So we're going to talk about that. A lot of our young people, they come in with dichotomous thinking. There's everything is extreme. There's no gray area anywhere. Either everything is great or everything is falling apart. So we have to work with our young people on that dichotomous thinking, selective abstractions. A lot of our young people and a lot of us sometimes, we base our view on the world, our view on life, our view on society with isolated incidents. I talk to people all the time and they say, well, it's like this and it's like that, it's like this and like that, because my cousin Bill or whatever, this happened to him. That shaped their entire view on the situation. Arbitrary inferences, and of course, we've seen a lot of that on television and a lot of that in our lives and everything like that. We believe things without evidence. There's no evidence. There's no evidence to things that we believe, but that goes back to culture a lot of times because we've been raised to believe a certain thing, and no matter how much evidence you give a person, they're going to continuously believe that, and that's called arbitrary inferences. Overgeneralizations. You don't have to be a young person impacted by the criminal justice system to overgeneralize things. I think a lot of our young people overgeneralize things. We apply one event to everything that goes on in life. We apply one event to everything goes on in life. And the reality is, a lot of times they may have a point. They may have a point to not trust, to be hard to trust. They may have a point to always have their game face on because their life scripts told them to. But a lot of times it's only because of one person, one situation, they turn their whole world around and they look at the world just like that. Personalization. No matter what you say, they internalize it. They think you're talking directly to them. They think you're blaming them. They think you're just beating up on them. But of course, that could be far from the case. So we have to a lot of times be really careful about how we frame things when we're talking to our young people, because they'll relate everything to themselves sometimes. Magnification, minimization. Sometimes they don't know that it just ain't that serious. It ain't that serious, dude. It ain't that serious. Or, man, you're acting like this thing is nothing, but it's something. You know, you've committed or you've been charged with this particular crime, and if they charge you this thing again, them folks might put you under the building. Under the building means put you back in prison for a very long time. Once again, I use a lot of street terminology because I spend a lot of time with my young people, and that's how we communicate with one another. So yeah, so I tell them, man, them people put you under the building, man. You better take this thing really seriously. But anyway, and labeling or mislabeling, seeing yourself as your past mistakes, trauma, current imperfections, and identifying yourself by them. You know, I had that problem for a very long time. I would identify myself, my own personal label that I gave myself was, you know, even today, I tell my students, I ain't nothing but an old street gangster that happened to get a few degrees. That's what I tell my young people right now. But I know I'm more than that. I know that I'm not a gangster in the street because I'm not doing gangsterized things in the street. But I guess that's one of those psychological things that I still deal with from my time in the war zone, which some people call lower socioeconomic environments. I call them the war zone because that's exactly what it is. And I talk about that in my book. As a matter of fact, I talk about in my book that if you're well-spoken, if you're highly intelligent, that could actually be a detriment if you're trying to survive in certain areas of society, because those things are not respected. They're not needed in the streets, and they can actually become a detriment. All right, self-defeating thinking. It's learned during childhood. We know that. We know self-defeating thinking is learned during childhood. You know, there are certain things that our parents tell us that become stored in our brains, and sometimes it's really difficult to overcome those ideas about ourselves, and certain things, in the environment that we see. You know, so a lot of times our environment, it tells us you can't be nothing more than a drug dealer, armed robber, murder for hire, whatever the case may be. Our environment tells us those things, and we begin to believe those things. Earlier, I said that there was a time when I was at a crossroads in my life, and I'm gonna pause right here and just digress and tell you this quick story of myself. So I came out of prison, and I had a job at this. It was on Fort Jackson, but I was a dining facility assistant. Basically, I would mop floors, wash dishes, bus tables, things like that. But I was also a student in college at the time, and I was going to school. I was earning my associate's degree in human services. And this particular day, when I got off from work, I would walk to school every day because I didn't have a car. And it was raining this day, and I was walking, and a guy stopped, and he was in a brand new Suburban, and I knew him. And he said, "Man, what's up, G-Man?" That's an old name I had years ago, and he still referred to me as that. "What's up, G-Man?" And I said, "Hey, man, trying to get to the college, man. Give me a ride." He said, "Jump in." So I jumped in, and we were riding. He said, "What you do at the college? Do you work there?" He thought I was a housekeeper or something at the college. I said, "No." I said, "No, I'm a student." He said, you in college for what? I said, human service. He said, what's that? I said, well, it's closely related to social work, but human service more in general, so on and so forth. And he told me this, and I hope I don't offend anyone. He told me this. He said, you mean to tell me, after all this bullshit you've done in these streets, them white folks is gonna let you become a social worker and walk away smelling like a rose? And I was at a crossroads. For a minute, I was like, man, this dude right. And he opened up the glove compartment and he had 2 pistols and a big old bag of crack cocaine. He said, man, you better come get down with this. And for a split second, I was at that crossroads, but I made the right choice. I said, man, let me out this truck, man. And I remember when I was getting out of the truck, he said, nigga, you a fool. Well, long story short, about 2 weeks later, the feds kicked in his door, and that was like 2008, and he's still incarcerated today. So when I tell that story to my young people, I always ask, so who is really the fool? All right, so taking the heat model, of course, we know we got to hear the person out, and we have to empathize with their situation, and I'm empathizing with their situation can be as simple as you hear them out, and you just give it back to them in another way, paraphrase it. So what I'm hearing you saying is blah, 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 blah. I just want to understand better. That could actually change a person's perception of the entire process of what we're doing here. The next one, A, apologize for their distress. Even though you didn't create their distress, apologize for their distress. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. You know, what can we do now to try and turn that around? You know, that goes a very long way. I apologize for what happened to you. As a matter of fact, Oprah Winfrey, we recently wrote a book, you know, to ask the question, what happened to you? And those things are important. And of course, a timeline for answers. You know, hey, look, I don't have the answer right now, but I will get back with you within this period of time. And when you get back with them, if you still don't have the answer, but please keep your timeline. You don't have the answer. Hey, I'm just getting back with you. You know, I still don't have the answer yet, but I'm still working on it. We will be surprised how far that goes with our young people, that we do everything we say we're going to do. Everything we say we're going to do, and we give them a timeline as to where we're going to do what we said we're going to do. All right, next thing, things to practice, of course, this is something I teach my students as well as my young people, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Forgiveness, love, kindness, be more kind, be kind to people. And as we show them empathy and warmth, we have to teach them to become more empathetic and warm as well. So I guess this slide has a dual meaning, because it's for our young people and it's for ourselves, right? Non-judgment. You know, I know it's difficult sometimes for us not to judge people by their mistakes that they made in the past. It's not to judge people by the way they dress, by the way they speak, just all those things. I'm sure even on here, some of you may judge me because I use a lot of street terminologies, you know, and that may not be something that you're accustomed to when I'm being in webinars. You may not be accustomed to people using all these street terminologies there, and I apologize for that. But I'm from the streets, and I don't apologize for that at all whatsoever. As a matter of fact, for me, it's a badge of honor coming from the streets and being where I am today. And we give the best visualization. What is the best visualization? The best self-visualization, I'm sorry. We help people to understand their strengths. We show them the good in themselves, and we show them the good in us as well. We show them, look, you're good in this area, this area, this area, and you are not your mistakes. You are not your mistakes. Your behavior does not equal you, and I think that's something really important. and we also show gratitude, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, every time I meet a new youth, and I meet anywhere from 10 to 30 a month, and every time I meet a new youth, I grow. I grow from their experiences. I grow from their experiences. I grow from their experiences, and I'm grateful for that. And I tell them, I say, you really helped me to grow, and thank you so much for that. I'm really grateful for that. And that helps them to also see their self-worth. See, all these methods, the whole thing is we want them to see their self-worth, we want their self-esteem to grow, we want their self-concept to grow, because once those things grow, because they believe they've achieved some things, once those things grow, then they could bud. They could bud into wonderful flowers. And I really believe that. And acceptance of self and others. We have to be able to accept them. Even when they come through with the worst of attitudes, the worst of ideas, say the worst things to us, we still have to accept them for who they are. And the same as we teach them, guide them as relates to they can't allow other people to change who they are. We cannot allow them, even though they may be really rough around the edges and again say things to us or whatever. Like I told you guys earlier, I've even had young people to attempt to perpetuate violence against me. We still have to accept them for who they are. Now, of course, do we have to continue to put up with that forever? Of course not. We can refer them out to other individuals, someone who may be able to help them better. Because as we do know, we can't help everybody to come through. We can't help everybody to come through, but we can refer them to other individuals who we believe that can better help them, people that they'll be more receptive to that help. All right. And again, we go back to the holistic approach to biological, psychological, social, cultural, financial, and spiritual self. I can't talk about this enough, because of course these are the 6 aspects that make up every human being. And if we can formulate an approach as to where we can deal with each of these aspects, and they don't have to become perfect in those aspects, of course not. I mean, how many of us are perfect in any of these areas, or at least most of these areas? How many of us are perfect in those areas? They don't have to be perfect, but we do work with them until they can strike a balance in these areas, The biological self, of course, is the physical self. It's those health type things, but also the biological self, we take it to another level and we talk about sexuality. And when we talk about sexuality, we don't tell them what their sexuality, what their genitals or anything like that should be, and because it doesn't matter, because they're human beings. We're all human beings, so it really doesn't matter. But we do talk about sexual approaches and what we mean by sexual. And we do talk about sexual approaches and ways to protect yourself from certain things. And Mrs. Shabazz and her crew, I actually have a staff of all men. She has a staff of all women. And her staff, I call them the crew, and they something else. But her crew, they talk to the young ladies and they talk about things like pregnancies and things like STDs, and they even get as deep as, knowing your worth and just all those kind of things. But I'm not going to get into that because I do not guide the young ladies. I guide the young men. The psychological, how do we look at things? How do we look at ourselves? How do we look at life? The sociological, again, how do we navigate our way through life? How do we become social engineers? How do we put ourselves in situations that can help us to grow? There's nothing wrong with being a utilitarian. There's nothing wrong with utilizing everything you can utilize to gain leverage to make your life better. There's nothing wrong with that. We talk about manipulating others, and we talk about how we always look at manipulation as being something negative, right? Because we've been told you're a manipulator, you're a manipulator. It's always in a negative context. But I also show them that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, they were all manipulators, but a lot of times they manipulate for the good. Manipulate only means to get people to see things the way that you see it. So there's nothing wrong with that as relates to your personal growth and development. And of course, back to that financial stuff, as Brianna Brianna conveyed to us, that for a lot of our young people, how do you get them to understand that? Look, slow money is show money. All money ain't good money. Come on now, man. We got to do better, man, because in the long run, we don't want to end up back in juvenile justice or either in the prison, as I did when I left juvenile justice, or in the prison, or even murdered on the streets. I know that sounds really cliche, it's dead or in jail, but for a lot of our young people, they really understand dead or in jail because a lot of the older people from their neighborhoods are either dead or in jail. So really they understand that, and that goes back to a framework that we create for the young people so that, it won't sound so cliche and they can get on the conversation. And when you start talking about people in their neighborhoods or family members who have lost their lives to the streets, to trying to make money, they become really engaged in that conversation. Let me say that 100% of the time, they become really engaged in that conversation because that's something that they can identify with. So, and even the ones that can't really identify with that, people that don't come from those lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but they still have been in contact with the criminal justice system. We're not really talking about them right now, but there are those individuals that come from very good homes, great parents with the tools to really extend opportunities to them, and they still take to the streets because they think it's really exciting, these kind of things, and they even participate as well, discussing how they look at death from the streets and things like that. A lot of times it comes from rap music. They use a lot of rap lingo, but of course we know that rap music is only a reflection of what goes on in real life. That cultural thing, again, going back to their family history, that's really important. Going back to their family history. What about your parents? What about your grandparents? Do you know any of your great uncles, or whatever the case may be? When I discuss my culture, I can go back as far. Well, I can actually go back as far as my great-great-grandfather Wilbur, who was actually a slave, but just in terms of this conversation, he was released, by the way, from the Blue Plantation by a cat named Julian DeBose. But I can go back to my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandfather lived in Hot Springs, Florida. He was an alcoholic. He was a drunk. So I could see why my mother and father why my mother was so easily influenced by my father to become cross-addicted to heroin and my alcohol, because he was a drunk. He was a very violent man, not only in the home, but he would fight in the streets. He would go to the little honky-tonks and fight and go to jail a lot. So I understood more why I was the way I was, because I understood my grandfather, what he taught my uncles and my mother. So it was just that generational piece that I was prone to not being the most successful young person, because it was handed down generationally. I'm sorry. So your culture is very important, because we have to go back as far as we can to bring it forward. And of course, once again, your spirituality, which has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with religion, even though your spirituality can be connected to a religion, it has nothing to do with your religion. What are those things that make your soul feel good? What are those things that make you feel all giddy inside? You know, what are those great things? And we can pinpoint those things. And a lot of times our young people, they're connected to a particular religion by family, by the familiar social construction. And in that case, and we identify that, okay, the religion is, yeah, we basically refer them to a pastor or someone like that. So strategic plans. Of course, we create missions, visions, short-term goals, a SWOT analysis, and we do, as the great Stephen Covey said in his book, 7 Habits of Successful People, we begin with the end in mind. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Like for instance, with Project Knox Community Development Corporation, we have a vision, a mission. And again, I had a cerebrovascular accident, so when I talk a long period of time, excuse me because I become really winded. And of course we create long-term, short-term goals for our organization. And I'm talking about my organization right now, but this is for our young people. What is your vision? You know, what do you want this thing to look like for you? You know, what's the mission? You know, what are you gonna achieve? You know, what are your short-term goals? And we begin with the short-term goals. We don't go far out. We don't really go long-term at first until they become comfortable with achieving a short-term goal after short-term goal after short-term goal. And then we may go further out with them if services had been terminated before we get to that point. And of course, we create a SWOT analysis for every one of our young people. I know we look at SWOT analysis strictly being for corporations and businesses, but SWOT analysis are good for our young people because they can actually look at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and they can have a realistic view of what they're up against and what they can fight with. And once again, we begin these processes with the end in mind. The SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? And this is good for every aspect of life, I believe. I use it in my personal life, professional life. I create them with my students at the college, and I create them with my young people. And we go through an extensive process with these SWOT analysis. What is a SWOT analysis, right? It identifies what you're doing well. It identifies weaknesses, and it minimizes the risk for those weaknesses. It mitigates those risks. It identifies advantages, and we can utilize them. It identifies oppositions to your goal achievement. Because there's always going to be oppositions. There's always going to be things that stand in our path there's always going to be things that stand in our path that's going to hurt us, or that's going to disenfranchise us from our goals that we want to reach. And of course we want to make that as we want to minimize that as much as we possibly can. So basically, I just created this little slide right here, that things that could be put into a SWOT analysis. A young person might say, I don't have enough time. A young person might say, man, I know what to do with my time. I know how to utilize my time. So your strength is time management. When I make my mind up for something, I do it. We know most of our young people, they believe that when they make their mind up, they do it. So we put that in the strength category. You're very disciplined. I'm smart. I'm really smart. Okay, so intelligence is another strength of yours, right? So what's your weaknesses? I don't got no money. My parents don't got no money. I don't have transportation, or whatever the case may be, right? So we put financial insecurities. You know, a lot of our young people, and they admit it, and some of them even use it as a badge of honor. I can't control my anger. It's difficult. So emotional control, because we don't want to say that, right? And well, I say I have anger management at the end, so we're gonna flip that. You know, I become really emotional sometimes. So emotion control, and then I can't control my anger. I get mad fast. And again, a lot of young people, they use that as a badge of honor, that they get mad fast. So we write down anger management, opportunities, self-evaluation. You see, now understand that your strengths and weaknesses, they're internal. Your opportunities or threats, they're external, right? So now we go to external things, opportunities. Everybody got an opportunity for self-evaluation. Everybody have an opportunity to be supported by their peers. Everybody has an opportunity to set new goals. So guess what? That's simple, right? Putting them into practice may not be that simple, but just listening to them for the time being is simple. What's threats? They may have family distractions, come from a dysfunctional household, you know, come from a place where there's a lot of noise. There's always something going on. There may also be illegal activities going on in the home. So family distractions, my environment. Man, I come from hell. They say you come from hell. I come from hell, man. Ain't nothing positive going on in my neighborhood. So your environment, and then of course, if they're too young to drive, then they may have transportation issues because they have to rely on other people for transportation to get to the place that they need to go to. I know a number of young people, they've indicated that they were hired for a job but couldn't get there because their parents couldn't get them there. Or they were great sportsmen in school, but their parents couldn't get them to practice and things like that, let alone pay for the insurance and the uniforms and all those kind of things. All right, so then we go to stages of change. And the stage of change is very important, but of course we're not going to spend hardly any time on this because we totally understand these things. There's a pre-contemplation phase, a contemplation phase, there's a preparation stage, an action stage, and we got to always go back and do maintenance. And when we go back and do maintenance, sometimes we have to go back as far as the preparation stage with our young people to actually do that maintenance or to redirect the things that they're wanting to accomplish. And here we go. What happens when your pyramid is turned upside down? We know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the physiological, basic food, clothing, and shelter, the safety. We know that we need to have a place to live. We need to have locks on our doors. We don't want to live in a place as to where we have to fight our way in and fight our way out. Safety mechanisms, love and belonging. We know what that is, i.e. healthy relationships. I found that our young people don't like to call it love and belonging because it makes them feel too vulnerable, if that makes sense to you. Makes them feel very vulnerable with when you use the term, you know, you need somebody to love you and you want to love someone, and you want to feel like you belong. And for some reason, a lot of our young people look at that as being a weakness rather than a strength, or rather than just a reality of human beings. Esteem. We always want to have or need to have that positive self-concept, the way we look at ourselves, and we discuss that a lot because bottom line is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase our young people's self-concept so that they know that there's nothing they cannot do. And of course, last is self-actualization. But what happens when your pyramid is turned upside down? The first thing is it's unstable. It's unstable. It's going to fall over eventually. And why is it going to fall over eventually? It's going to fall over eventually because if you try to appear self-actualized when your other needs aren't met, your facade, your mask is going to be pulled off eventually, and your whole house of cards is going to fall. That's why a lot of our young people end up incarcerated. That's why a lot of our young people end up on the streets. That's why a lot of our young people who begin selling drugs end up using drugs, because we want to be viewed as being self-actualized before our other needs are met. And our young people, they get a kick out of this because they can actually sit back and they can account events as to where their house of cards or their pyramid began to fall. And I'm really excited about this because this is a turning point in a lot of our young people's lives. And I'm not wanting to boast, but I am boasting that Project Knox Community Development Corporation, we have a really good record as it relates to helping our young people become better. I don't like the term change. I don't like the term change. I don't want to change our young people. I want our young people to become better. I do not want them to change. I want them to become better, because they have good aspects when they come in for services. And we want to keep those things. We don't want to change them. We want them to feel better. So, do we have any questions, comments? And I cannot see my chat box right now. So if you would unmute yourself when you ask your questions, that would be great. I can't.
You muted yourself.
Okay, so now I can see my chat. Okay, I put relapse in my stage of change. I believe relapse ought to be a part of the process of change and not to shame it. Well, yes, of course. So are you referring to relapse as it relates to substance abuse, or relapse as it relates to the entire process? I think that's very important. I think that's very important, because we do know that relapse is a legitimate term as it relates to falling back into certain behaviors. But at Project Knox, we don't use the term relapse. But of course, relapse is really good, and of course, like in your area, everyone is different, and that probably goes over very well. So that's really good that you put relapse into your stages of change. That's really good. I have one. His son, Sean Kobe wrote 7. Okay, cool beans. Effective teens. Yeah, effective teens. When he began talking about his son, the baseball player. Okay, that's good. You have a copy of that as well. All right. Your input is great. So, okay. So do anyone have any further questions or comments? And once again, please give me all the comments possible, because I grow off of you guys. I'm not the expert of everything on the planet. I'm not the scholar of everything on the planet. I just happen to know some things that work with young people because of my experiences and education as well, but primarily because of my experiences with young people.
Well, I like the upside down pyramid. I thought that was awesome. That is something that I will definitely integrate it when I'm working with my at-risk kids. That was very enlightening. I really like that.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Anyone else? Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I see that our executive director has put in the chat box how you can purchase my latest book, From Prison Walls to College Halls, Achieving Success in the Face of Adversity. And believe it or not, that book could or will be a great benefit to young people, to helping professionals to better understand, because those of us who don't come from the streets, we have to look to those who do have those experiences to better understand our young people. So with that, we're gonna take a 10-minute break because we're 54 minutes into this module and it's 1:05. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.
I also want to say that we'll have our contact information at the end, and it's also in a handout that we provided, that will be provided to all the attendees of the webinar. If something comes to mind that after the presentation that you want to ask Hameen about, we can email, you can send us an email, or we'll have our contact information available as well.
All right, so let's do this. Let's get module 4 out of the way. And what we call this is creative curriculums. And basically what our life skill module consists of, and of course we also do support groups and various other things, but what our life skill module is a 6-week life skill module. And what it consists of is the me versus the we. Because no man is an island, right? We don't live on a planet all by ourselves. We live on a planet of 7 billion people. The rescue protest versus the dominant resolve. And we're going to discuss that a little further. Overcoming life scripts, those verbal and nonverbal messages we receive growing up as children. Building healthy relationships with other people. And a lot of times our young people, they're really interested in talking about intimate relationships, but we're talking about intimate relationships, business relationships, you name it. We're talking about associate relationships and the whole 9 yards. Setting and managing goals, of course, we've talked about that throughout this presentation, and that's really important because whether we realize it or not, we set goals for everything that we do in life. We set a goal to wake up a certain time in the morning to get to work. We set a goal for those of us who are trying to be more healthy, we set goals for times that we're going to eat and what we're going to eat, just all those kind of things. And lastly, what does money have to do with it? And again, this is huge because a lot of our people, our young people, our participants come from economically disadvantaged communities, and they look at money quite differently than most people look at money. And we're going to that further in the presentation. If I can make this thing go forward. There it is. Okay. So we talk about the road to the criminal life course, right? Because there's always a road. If we talk about a life course, there's events that happen behind one another. There's events that happen behind one another until we get to that point. And one of them, and again, we go back to money, one of them is lack of opportunities. And why do we have lack of opportunities? Because a lot of times we don't have the finances to take advantage of opportunities. And one thing that I was reading recently in my Global Career Development Facilitators course is that for a lot of marginalized individuals is that they don't, and I never looked at it like this, but it made perfect sense with the young people that I serve. A lot of times they don't think that they deserve opportunities. They don't think that they're worth opportunities. They think their opportunities are for more affluent people. And going back to what Lucretia was saying earlier, they believe that their only job is to basically take orders, and if they're not taking orders, it's because they're into some kind of criminal endeavors, if that make any kind of sense. The next one is lack of education. a lot of times our young people, going back to that third grade thing as relates to when the government planned to build prisons, and that is sad and sickening, but there's actually a method to that, because the prisons fill so quickly. And these individuals, they've actually gotten it down to a science, the relation to education and being a productive member of society. So lack of education, lack of resources. We go back to transportation. We go back to that, and a lot of times the resources that we need, they're not in our communities. You know, I can remember in my master's program, we talked about family-based case management, and we talked about how family case-based management is normally in rural areas where they bring the service to the person. Well, for a lot of our individuals, they don't come from rural areas. Some do, but most don't. A lot of our people, they come from the inner cities. And we imagine, you know, well, the resources, they're in the inner city. I mean, they're in the city limits, so they should be able to get there, but that's not always the reality. They can't get there. So they lack the resources that they need. And again, we go back to culture. The criminogenic life course. It's a cultural thing for a major part. You know, how many of us here, when we start talking to our young people, yeah, daddy's in jail or daddy was in jail. My uncles are in jail. My uncles are drug dealers. You know, my mother worked 2 jobs, or my mother, you know, she's on the system, and her boyfriend, and, you know, just all the things that we hear. So our culture, the way that we look at the world, comes from our culture. And that's really important. Disability. Some of our young people have congenital or developmental disabilities, right? And those disabilities, they can either cause them to think a certain way, or the humiliation and shame and the stigma on what we call a disability. I like to call them special abilities, but the stigma on disabilities can also lead our young people to want to be accepted, and be accepted by the wrong people in our environment. And last one, fragile families. If daddy locked up and mama don't make very much money, or if mama got 2-3 jobs trying to put food in your mouth, you know what I mean? I mean, you know, this creates fragile family syndrome. So if you have a fragile family, anything may happen, and a lot of times it sends our young people on the criminogenic life course, fragile families. And lastly, they end up incarcerated, whether it's juvenile incarceration, whether it's adult incarceration, and we already know the stats. most of our individuals who are in adult prisons, they've been in contact with juvenile justice before they even made it to the prison, because it's one big life course. So our job is to break that cycle, to help them to break that cycle, to show them that there's actually more to life. My nonprofit organization, we're doing a fundraiser right now to buy a safe house for young people coming out of juvenile justice who are in gangs and want to come out of gangs, because we have to break the cycle some kind of way. A safe house, and we already have networks with other safe houses around the country, because other people are doing it. No one in South Carolina is doing it yet. We hope to be the first. And so we already have networks with them. After we help these individuals with these skills, and we help them to change the cycle, then we send them to another state where no one knows them. And we send them to another safe house, that is, in another state where no one knows them. So we're trying to get a house so that we can be a part of that process, because it's working well around the country. It's working very well around the country. So I'm not going to digress too much. I'm just going to keep on, because we only have 26 minutes left. I know you guys are glad. Man, get this crazy man up off of here. But anyway, again, we're continuing the road to the criminal gender life course. But a lot of times, they're marginalized individuals. They feel like aliens in their own country. How can you not feel like an alien in your own country when you see everybody enjoying the fruits of Americanism except you and your peers, you and your environment, you and your group? How can you help but not feel like an alien in your own country? And we also understand for African Americans and also other populations as well, you know, we are alienated. We are alienated, and no offense to anyone on here, but the reality is that we are aliens. And I feel like an alien sometime in my own country, and I'm doing pretty well in life right now. But I feel like an alien sometimes because because as I matriculate through society, I find myself always having to make the dominant culture feel comfortable. Feel comfortable because I don't want to be labeled as being an angry individual. I don't want to be looked at as being that angry black man who's gonna just tear everything up, especially having a criminal record. Existing institutions do not serve their needs. This is why Project NOS Community Development Corporation and also other organizations throughout the country, we're changing the service model, we're changing the narrative, we're changing some things because we're changing some things. Let me just say that. I don't want to offend anyone on here, but at Project NOS Community Development Corporation and research of other organizations like my own around the country, it shows that the old school helping model isn't really working for our young people. Let me just say that. They feel overwhelmed. Our young people feel overwhelmed too. It appears that everything they try, nothing is working. They feel very overwhelmed. As a matter of fact, I'm writing a book now. It's called Black Battle Fatigue, Soldiers on the Front Line. And it talks about becoming overwhelmed because every time you walk out your front door, it's like you're in the war zone. They feel powerless. They feel inferior. They don't feel worthy. They don't feel worthy of doing better, of just doing all these great things in life. They feel helpless. They feel hopeless. They don't feel like they belong. And guess what? I wouldn't feel like I belong either when I've spent my entire life in one environment, and then now I'm trying to be able to fit into a new environment. I feel like I would feel like I've been working for the college for 10 years, and sometimes I still feel as though I do not belong there. Why do I feel like I do not belong there? Because I'm a little more recalcitrant than a lot of individuals who I don't want to say what I'm thinking right now. But anyway, that is very important. And another thing that we talk to our young people about is something that I call PEAS, 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 and that's post-environmental abnormality syndrome. And what PEAS is something that I created, so you're not gonna be able to find it online or in any textbook or anything like that. It's when an individual has spent so much time in an abnormal environment, it becomes normalized. And when they're introduced to quote unquote a normal environment, that becomes abnormal to them. And it becomes incredibly difficult to navigate. And that's something that I'm really proud of as well. Because we see it all the time. When we talk to our young people, we see it all the time. I'm not going there. I'm not going to do that. I've never been there, that kind of thing, because that's not normal for them, because they spent so much time in their abnormal environments. And the last one is dependency. And Lucretia said it best. They've been told what to do so long until they believe that they'll always be dependent on the system. they can't survive without the system. And a lot of times that comes from their life scripts, because generationally their family members have lived off of the system. I'm not saying anything wrong with that. So now we go back to the me versus we thinking. I'm not even gonna deal with that slide. Here we go. All right. So the me versus we, the socialized self versus the unsocialized self. We have got to soften the egg. We have got to soften our young people. We have got to get them to see that they're not an island, they're not alone, and they have to think about others. And of course, we have an entire workshop for that for our young people. The rescue protest versus the dominant resolve. The rescue protest, always looking for help with something. Always want others to do things for them. I know we've encountered a lot of our young people like that. Versus the dominant resolve. I'm going to work my way through situations. I'm going to think my way through situations. That's the difference between rescue protest and dominant resolve. And this is our blueprint, of course, and this is what our life skill modules consist of. The internal, external, local control, we talk about that all the time, right? Because we have to teach our young people to be accountable for their actions. It's not everyone else's fault. It's not, we can't continue to assign blame to other people. We can't do it. We have to look within ourselves and see what we can do to make our lives better. Overcoming life scripts. I tell my young people, it's as easy as changing that CD in your brain, but it's not that easy. Believe you me, it's not that easy, because knowledge is a blessing and a curse. The things that we see are blessings and curses, and the blessing is we get experience. The curse is once you know, you can't unknow. You know, I didn't watch, let me rephrase that. I was in my room at 11 years old, my father murdered my mother. When I heard the gunshots, I went into my mother's room and she was there in a puddle of blood. I was 11 years old. I'm 51 years old now, and I cannot get that image out of my mind. So therefore, the blessing, the curse. Once experience is a blessing, because I can use that to help other young people who's been in certain situations like mine. But the curse is that once I saw it, once I knew it, I could never unknow it. I could never unsee it. So, but that's all right, because I'll probably grieve for the rest of my life. But I understand healthy grief versus unhealthy grief, but that's a totally different workshop. Authentic love versus unauthentic love. We also deal with our young people on that. You know, what is authentic love? What's authentic love look like? And what is unauthentic love? And what does that look like? Because of course, for our young men, you know, they like to do what we call pimp talk their way through this module. But for our young ladies, Mr. Lawrence and everybody like that, Mr. Lawrence, she's indicated that that is something that our young women are really interested in, and I totally understand why. Building and maintaining healthy relationships. We also have an entire workshop on that as well. And when I say workshop, we actually spend 3 hours on each one of these, and until we get through everything. Let me just say that. Setting and managing goals, of course, you do that. And what does money have to do with it? We always keep going back to that one, Brianna. We keep going back to that one because once again, we look at money in an unrealistic way. A friend of mine, he has a nonprofit organization called Path to Redemption, and we talk a lot and we share we share knowledge and resources and what we're getting out of our people. Now his nonprofit is strictly for adults coming out of Department of Corrections, and of course mine is for adults and young people. But we both agree that, man, they don't have a realistic view on what money looks like. They don't have a real, a lot of times we come out of these jails, prisons, or we hadn't even been. My 19-year-old daughter, she never been to jail. She never been to prison. She she's in college, and you know, she work, and she has her own car, and lives with her brother, my son Donovan, and they live together. They got out of my house. I'm grateful for that. But when you talk to her about money, she's 19 years old. And in South Carolina, $12 an hour is a good amount of money for a 19-year-old person, you know, starting out, and you don't have your degree or anything yet. And she's convinced that it's slave labor, that it don't pay enough money. So we have a real unrealistic view on what money really looks like a lot of times. And with that, we have an entire workshop on what does money look like. Then we call in financial advisors and just things like that. And they talk to our young people, and they talk to them about being able to save their money and possibly getting on Robinhood, because that's like the big thing for young people, possibly getting on Robinhood and, you know, invest small amounts of their money and just all those kind of things, and show them and show them how going on a job, working, how you can increase your wealth. You know, even if you start out, if you're 16 and you make minimum wage, so what? You know what I mean? So what? You know, save X amount of money. And a lot of times you say, well, dang, that ain't that much money. And I tell them 5% of not that much money ain't that much money. You know what I'm saying? So some of them get it. Some of them get it, but I do respect them because they have high aspirations and goals. And we can, if we can only change that model from doing whatever they can do to make some money to doing the right thing to make some money, then we believe our job is done. So with that, I'm going to allow Ms. Shabazz now to actually do my book promotion type thing, because I'm not really good at. Where's the video? My wife just told me I have to show you guys the video, and I don't even know where the video is. Here's the video right here. I guess I got to show y'all this video because my boss told me I have to. I hope you all enjoyed that brief video about my book, and you're able to understand a little bit more about myself and why I do what I do, and why I'm so adamant, and why I'm always looking for new and innovative ways to offer services to my population, because I am my population. And I think that's one of my great strengths. And just a side note before my boss come and tell you more about my book and how to order my book, and also how to hire me to come in and do workshops in your particular location, I just want to let you know that the guy that was in the video, he's the guy I was telling y'all about earlier, the inmate that I spent so much time in prison with, that actually helped me to come from a 4th grade reading level to earning my GED. I just want to share that. His name is Cleveland Anderson. He's an excellent man, and we're still close friends to this day. So without any further ado, our Executive Director, Dolores Shabazz, she's going to come and talk to you guys a little bit about my book, and of course, how you can email me just with any questions, comments, or anything like that. Also, I would like to say that we have, the book is available on Amazon, Books Me, and Barnes and Nobles. However, I would rather for you to order straight from us. And the reason why I would rather for you to order straight from us is because when you order straight from us, we give $5 from each book to our nonprofit organization to help our young men and women to achieve their goals. We pay for parties, expungements, criminal record checks. We pay for transportation. We pay light bills. We pay water bills, whatever it takes to help our people. And we pay for college applications as well. Mr. just reminded me to let you guys know we pay for their college applications, and we also pay for their GED tests. So of course those things don't come cheap. So if you purchase straight from us, then we can afford to give that $5 to our nonprofit organization. But if you order Amazon Books, Me, and Barnes and Nobles, they take so much, and my royalties are so small, I really can't afford to give anything. So other than that, here go Mr. Shabazz. He has about 14 minutes before it's over. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I had a blast. Peace and power.
This is the shirt. It says, "You know my name, not my story." So I want to show you guys that. And let's see. Let's go back to our contact information. Where's this chat? Okay, there's our contact information. If anybody wants to contact us, the email is there, our phone number, our website. We have a Facebook page. And also, I just wanted to say the uniqueness of Project Nas is Hameen Shabazz. And the reason why is because not only of his success, but something that we implement in Project Nas is education. And a lot of times we find that, you know, young people are told or directed to like trade jobs or low paying jobs. But we believe, and we have the example to show them, you can succeed anything you put your mind to. And if you want to go to college, if you want to be a social worker, if you want to exceed, you know, you don't want to work a minimum wage job, you don't want to be a trade job, you have the right to do that. You have the right to do anything you want to, and we'll always be there to help, you know, guide people to that path. And he, Mr. Shabazz, already showed you guys let me see here, showed you guys how to order the book. I can't get to the next slide. Okay. So you can contact us via email, or you can, and we accept Zelle, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, as the various payment apparatuses. And also, if you have any questions or something that you would like for him to follow up, you can always send us an email. Miss Lucretia has our contact information, and our contact information will be available in the handouts as well. So I'll pass the floor back to you, Lucretia.
Thank you so much, Dolores. I want to thank everybody for your time and your attention today. I do want to remind anyone, just in case you forgot, to type your name and organization in the chat so that we can send you the handouts, and make sure you get credit for CEUs if you need to. I just want to, you know, again, thank the Shabazzes. This was an awesome presentation. You gave us, you know, a lot of things. You gave us a lot of, oh, excuse me, I'm rude. I don't even have my camera on. You gave us a lot of information. You gave us some treatment considerations. You gave us resources. But the biggest takeaway for me, and I hope the audience feels the same, is that we're reminded to look at the people we work with as more than their conviction. You know, look at more than what they've been charged with, to look at them as a person and to approach them holistically. And so a lot of times we have these trainings, and when it's over, we're like, okay, what do we do next? What do we do with this information? But for me, it's, you know, a self-reflection of how, you know, I think about the people that we work with and the people really that we serve.